still show that everybody's connecting still.
Oh, okay.
It may be my internet.
No, it's probably ours.
Are you showing everybody connected?
I've got one more.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Nope, two more.
Two more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start if that works for everyone. Good evening. We'd like to welcome you to the March 25, 2021 meeting of the Board of Dwelling Standards and Review. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 78, this meeting is being conducted electronically. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to the public via the city's YouTube page, accessible at johnsoncitytn.org/meetings, no later than 2 business days from the date of this meeting. The time is now 6:01. Present and constituting a quorum are board members Dave Jenny, Gwen Hunter, Jennifer Hyder, Jonna Robbins, and I'm the chairman, Jenny Lockmiller. When the property you wish to speak about is announced, please indicate your presence by raising your hand. After being recognized by the chairman, each person wishing to speak should come forward to the microphone and state their name and address before making any comments. Please keep in mind that these hearings are recorded, so if you refer to a document or photograph, please describe it. Also, please speak clearly and speak up, stating yes or no to questions that may be asked. You also have the right to have your attorney present during the hearing, though the strict rules of evidence that are found in a court do not necessarily apply here. After entry of an order by the board, you will have 60 days to appeal the order in Chancery Court if you choose to do so. Does anyone have any questions?
Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
just provide one point of clarification, really, especially since this is, I believe, being live cast or simulcast using a variety of these media sources. The introductory comments you just read are the same introductory comments you read at the beginning of every meeting.
Yes,
However, it is to be noted that there is not a scheduled public hearing for today. So those people who will speak will be sworn in, and those will be the ones who have been asked to come back and testify, but there's not an advertised public hearing for today.
Yes. So do we want to swear them in individually then, or do the all at once at the beginning?
It really matters not. Whatever's the preference of the board.
Well, let's do as many people as want to jump in on this now. We'll do now, and then I'll ask each person before they speak if they were sworn in. All persons having intentions to speak before the board on any property, please prepare to be sworn in. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do so solemnly swear and affirm
I do so solemnly swear and affirm
that the testimony that I'm about to give is the truth,
that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Each board member and staff have been provided a copy of the minutes of the March 11, 2021 special called meeting. Are there any questions, amendments, or corrections in regards to the minutes? Not hearing any, the minutes will stand approved as written. The first item of business, oh wait. I think I left this part out. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 78, this meeting is being conducted electronically. Was that in my previous part I just read? Yes, I already read that. Sorry, I'm repeating. The first item of business is the continuance of 123 West Millard Street. Would city staff like to start?
I'll just remind the board the purpose of the meeting tonight, as Mr. Mitchell already alluded to, that this is a continue. You made a motion at the last meeting on March 11th to continue the property of 123 West Millard to tonight's meeting, to allow Mr. Gutshaw, the architect, to show the as-built drawing showing as much information as possible regarding the makeup of the building as a whole. Staff has no further evidence to bring forth at this time, and no further comments. So if you'd like to speak with Mr. Gutshaw at this time, or feel free to do so, or if you have questions of staff, that's fine as well.
We can start with Mr. Gutshaw. If you're ready, please.
Good evening. Just wanted to bring an update. I think the last meeting I stated that we would be working over the next couple of weeks after that meeting to prepare or update the as-built drawings, and we have been doing that diligently. We have also had my engineers, a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer had visited the site on Friday a week ago. So it's been almost 2 weeks. Friday, they have looked at the building and keyed in on some of the issues that have been expressed, and they are preparing their notes and information to apply to our documents. We are about 70 to 75% through with our as-builts at this time, but we are simultaneously incorporating and talking internally about some of the improvements that need to be made in regards to the electrical and mechanical that have been brought forward before, such as the fume hoods, or I call it fume, excuse me, kitchen hoods, and some of the receptacles and some of the wiring that has been brought to everybody's attention in the past. During that phase of documentation, we have verified that there are 2 exits on each floor and the basement. There are 4 exits on the main floor, the first floor of the building. There are exit signs in place with emergency lights, and there is a fully functional, full coverage fire alarm system within the building with audio and visual controls, and fire alarm and annunciation also in each of the private bedrooms. There are audio and visual signaling devices and smoke sensors. There is a capacity, I think, was brought up at the last meeting, David, as I looked at the square footage is one metric, but the other metric that I looked at was the number of showers that are in place, and based on the number of showers in both the building and the annex, I would rate the capacity at about 64 total for both buildings. Using that metric, if we use the toilets and toilet fixtures and lavatories, it would probably go up to about 70 capacity. And of course, if we based it on square footage, the capacity would be much higher than that. But since the showers would be the limiting factor on the capacity of the 2 buildings, the exits seem to be clear and free. And as you are aware, there are some hardware devices that need to be repaired. That is the subject of our efforts as the architects and engineers, is to identify those things and put those on the documents, which is what we are doing right now. Some of the hardware is just wore out and it needs to be fixed or replaced. And there are several fire extinguishers on each floor, and they are properly labeled and identified and appear to have been tagged recently as being operable and functional. And that's my update. So I'm moving towards probably having a set of documents that I could submit to David or the city early next week.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions for Mr. Gutschall?
No, I'd just like to say thank you, Mr. Gutschall. It sounds like progress is being made in a good direction.
Thank you.
Do you know how many is currently living there?
I do
Has
not.
that changed?
I do not know.
Okay.
Does the board have any other questions for city staff or for the attorneys or Mr. Gutschall?
No, I have no further questions. So I think for the sake of having proper discussion and moving the conversation forward, I'm prepared to make a motion that we limit the capacity at the property at 123 West Millard Street to its current occupancy level. While these repairs are being made.
So there is a motion that's been made, and I'll I'll hush while your chair goes through that. Do you want to see if there's a second on that before I add anything else, Chairwoman Lockmiller?
Yes. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion?
If you don't mind, before you act on the motion, I think it would be prudent to make some findings based on the information you received at the last meeting, in addition to the information you just received from the architect. So let's take a minute, if you all could, and chat amongst yourselves between the 5 of you as to the information that you either have in front of you or that you recall from the March 11th meeting, the testimonies you received, and the any documentation that you received, as well as what was carried forward. And how does that compare, or how does that contrast to information you've received tonight? And then again, as noted last time, don't worry about feeling the need to be overly formal, because we can help you with kind of walking through the right process. But begin making some comments as to, we find that X has been stated, or because Y has been stated, we find that this is appropriate or this is not appropriate.
Am I being heard?
Yes.
You are.
Okay. If I recall correctly, last meeting, the occupancy was 30-something people. And if we're going to vote on not exceeding what's currently there, I think that number should be looked at. Also, the hood system for the cooking at this point, unless it has changed dramatically since our last information, does not meet current codes by any means. And therefore, I don't feel that those living there should be fed by the existing kitchen that is there.
As
I agree with, go ahead, Gwen.
Well, I was gonna say, as I recall, the kitchen was ordered closed by city staff some time ago. And I think without any action to the contrary by this board, it remains closed. May I ask city staff if that is correct? Does the kitchen remain closed?
That is correct.
Okay, so, because
And that,
share your concern, Mr. Jenny.
and that is closed to preparing and serving food, or closed to heating food? That's a question.
I think we would need for Dave to give an exact on that. We could make assumptions.
The kitchen was closed to operation,
Okay,
period.
okay.
If I recall the last meeting, they had said that they are doing cold prep, like they're getting cold sandwiches and things like that. If my memory serves me correctly, is that they were saying that they were serving them cold food, nothing was hot. Is that correct? Or can someone confirm that?
I recall hearing that.
Okay.
I recall that was outside of the order that we had made, that the kitchen be closed.
Right.
So we may want to reiterate that tonight, that the food is to be closed completely. I mean, the kitchen is to be closed completely. If that's, I want to go with that.
So I think that you all are touching on a very important and excellent question that I think we do have a little bit of a loose end here. And so Dave, from your perspective, as Development Services Manager. I don't see Jeff on here, and Jeff may be in Will's office, but
Jeff's in here with me.
okay.
Jeff's
And
here
so-
for me. And just one point of clarification, in the minutes, the capacity that Miss Lee stated, the number that we're living there is 35. Sorry to interrupt you there, but it was 35 was what was presented at the last meeting. And I'll hush and let you all finish with your discussion there.
No, I appreciate that. That was helpful. So I guess Dave or Jeff, from your perspective, you had closed it last fall based on the current situation at the time. And so does cold prep, making sandwiches, things like that, is that, can you testify to their ability to operate in a minimal fashion like that as it relates to overall safety?
So when the order came about, it was based upon the cooking equipment and ventilation. That was the basis of the order. The order was to stop use of the kitchen, period. At that point in time, we didn't say it's okay to do X, Y, Z. We said stop using the kitchen. However, it was based on, of course, ventilation and equipment. So if you're not using ventilation and equipment, therefore, I think it would be fair to say that any, other serving would be fine. We just want to make sure that people are safe. We want to make sure that gas and ventilation isn't, a hazard. So I don't see an issue with that. But if we want to really split hairs and get down to the very exact specifics, the specific of the original order was to stop using the kitchen. And there was no variation given on that. It was just a stop. I'd like for people to be able to eat, and if it doesn't involve equipment and ventilation, I don't see a problem with that, but that's not the way we originally presented it. We just said stop.
Okay, so no heating of food at all, no microwaves, no ovens, no campfires, no heating of food at all, truly cold prep food.
And if I can have an opportunity to recall the last minutes to the board, so subject to
Actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Muse, that I'm not sure that I can allow you to speak at this point because we've already called for the question. The board is having discussion before we make a vote. Mr. Mitchell, can you confirm that for me?
Well, it's a little bit of a unique situation because Mr. Muse is representing his client who has been asked to come back and provide testimony. And so there are folks representing the property owner, that being the architect and then his legal counsel. So Mr. Muse would be really no different than Carl testifying. It's just that he's acting as legal counsel.
My concern is that they were given the opportunity to speak, and we've already had a motion and a second, and we've called for the question, and the only discussion we actually should be doing is for the motion that we currently have in front of us. So discussion about something that I'm not sure.
Sure. No, I understand. I understand. The only thing I just would encourage is for the board not to view the property owner's legal counsel as outside entities. They are essentially an extension of the property owner. That's all. But it's
I certainly
ultimately up to
understand that.
you all. Yeah,
I guess I am not sure the property owner would have the option to speak right now.
gotcha. Understood.
That's where I'm going. This is an internal discussion between board staff and the board. And if I'm incorrect on that, I'm perfectly fine to step back from that.
No, because of the way you just came about that, you're right. In any other meeting, if there's not an advertised public hearing, then there's not always the right for the property owner to speak if there's just internal discussion. So if there are any questions of the legal counsel, then you could do that. So
Yes.
you
Okay.
make the
Thank
point.
you.
And I'll
having,
just note in an objection to that, we weren't giving an opportunity to present today or to cross-examine the witnesses. Chairwoman Lockmiller jumped straight into reference to Mr. Gutschall and began questioning him, and we were not afforded that opportunity, or at least it was not made sufficiently clear to us. So you'll have to forgive me. I did miss that procedural happening, and that's why I tried to voice a concern at that point.
Your concern will be noted, Mr. Muse. Is there any other discussion?
well, I'd just like to say, the motion on the floor really is to limit occupancy. The bigger picture is why would we consider doing that? So just to speak to that a little bit, I appreciate hearing about the situation in the kitchen, and I'm comfortable with taking Mr. McClellan's recommendation that the kitchen remain closed to heating food for the reasons that he stated, but fixing cold food in there, I don't think that's, I mean, if we don't want them to do it in the kitchen, they're gonna do it in the living room, because I don't think there's much harm in doing the cold food. So I guess since he's given us the leniency of that, I'm fine with the cold food. My reason for making a motion to limit occupancy has everything to do with the safety features. Mr. Gutschall was informed us of the things that have been done to mitigate fire hazard. There are still considerable hazards in that building, as were demonstrated to us in past meetings. We've seen a lot of pictures of a lot of things. The reason that Mr. Gutschall has been hired in the first place is to figure out what's there and to help evaluate and get professional help to repair those situations, which was definitely the road we want to be going down. So just to limit the risk, it makes sense to me to limit the number of people that are at risk. So as a first step, I would like that, I made that motion to just limit it to the, we can, if anybody knows how many people are actually there, current occupancy, I could amend that motion to say limit the occupancy to 35, which was the last evidence that was presented to this board, just because I think it makes the facility a little bit safer as we go forward. And that's all just based on all of the information that we've been shown in the past.
I understand where you're coming from and mostly agree. My problem is this has been going on for so long without basically any cooperation that I have seen, that I have a problem with extending it.
So can you, so Mr. Jenny, provide some evidence from the meetings that, going back to January 28th to February 25th to March 11th, and then the evidence tonight. What would support your particular statement in that?
The fact that the city building department, the city fire department have been asking for cooperation and correcting things for many months. It's been before this board for quite a while. We have been asking for cooperation in correcting the issues. Other than the fact that we have possibly some drawings coming up in the next few weeks, I've not seen that any corrections have been made.
Right. So I don't believe that there were any anticipated, or at least immediate corrections anticipated. because of the steps involved that were discussed at the last meeting. So those steps being evaluation, and then after evaluation, plan development, and then after plan development, plan review, and then permitting, and then construction. And so, so do you believe, so the expectation for the last 2 weeks since March 11th was to achieve that first goal, that was evaluation. That, you know, next steps would then be determined once evaluation was presented. So you've received testimony from Mr. Gutshaw tonight that he's gotten so far, he's gotten to, you know, point X. Feel free to ask him other questions, you know, about what he has discovered in the building. Has he discovered anything in the building? He did testify to in fairly good detail about the status of the fire alarm system. But in terms of the overall building condition and the building systems, especially those that were noted and were cited, that being the electrical and the mechanical, ask him if he's able to testify as to whether or not the building can continue to be occupied at some capacity, whether that's 35 or some number, while we go through these next steps, while we go through the continuation of evaluation, plan development, plan review, and then permitting. So I would continue to draw information out of that gentleman.
Oh, okay. I understand where you're coming from. Mr. Cutshaw, you've talked about the building evaluation. I've heard nothing about any mechanical engineers being involved with the renovation of the kitchen hood system and ventilation system. Is that part of your investigation here, or?
Yes, that is. I think I did state that when my mechanical and electrical engineers visited the site about a week and a half ago, that was one of the main things. That was one of their main reasons for being there, was primarily the kitchen and the kitchen hood. And we are looking at the kitchen equipment specifications as we speak. I've shared the ideas or the concepts we have for which fire suppression system and kitchen hoods that we would like to propose in our specifications for the replacement of those hoods. The existing ranges now are electric ranges versus gas ranges. And we are selecting a hood for that condition. And we are looking at how we are going to route the ventilation and the ductwork from those hoods. So that is one of our primary focuses, and that couples with the electrical and the integrating the those type of hoods, those kitchen hoods with the fire suppression on board, have contacts on them that will be connected to the fire alarm system, so that if there is an event in the kitchen, and it will signal the fire alarm and signal the entire building if there's an emergency, or if there's a fire in the kitchen, God forbid, there's fire in the kitchen or fire under the hood. That's the purpose of that system. We have not presented this today, but again, because we are closing up our documents and my engineers are working on this information while we finish up some of the details of the dimensions of the building and finishing our as-built. So I've got 2 tracks going on with my electrical and mechanical engineers doing calculations for the various systems and things that we need to replace, while we continue to gather our data about the existing building and the existing conditions, so we can present a coherent set of documents to Dave for him to be able to approve and issue permits once the contractors get on board.
Mr. Gutshaw, at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, you told us this was going to be your process. Now you have a lot more information now, just having been in there for longer, looking at things than you did at the time. what can you tell us about what kind of a time frame we might be looking at here? By the time you go through your processes, get drawings fixed, to actually start some building, and maybe even look out on your crystal ball and see how long it might take to complete the work.
I recall saying that we would need a month from the time we met last week and last two weeks ago. And we're going to improve on that by trying to have our documents finished by the end of next week and get them to Dave. I seem to recall, and forgive me, Dave, if I'm speaking out of turn here, but I recall Dave saying he needed about a max of 5 days to do his plan review. And assuming we've done a good job and our plans are in good shape, then we might get an okay to issue those for, I'll call it bids, or get quotes. But we could advance that, and we already have started getting some quotes, just ballpark information on quotes for the improvements and for contractors that could do the work. So we could kind of be, again, going on a parallel track here, but until we get the plans in Dave's hands, and that's what my goal is going to be over the next week, is to get those in his hands, and then he'll have another week. So in about 2 to 2.5 weeks, Dave, we could have something where the contractors could apply for a permit to complete some of this work or start some of this work.
Again, it's all dependent upon the accuracy of the initial submittal,
Okay.
just as you stated.
And the only other thing I can see is what we call in the business lead time. Is the equipment is available, especially with the kitchen hoods, would be the only hiccup in that, Ms. Hunter. That would be, I would say weeks at the most to be able to get that. And we're trying to find equipment that's off the shelf. It's nothing exotic. It's nothing unusual. That would be our goal.
Right. Well, and the kitchen, the kitchen, it's a huge plus if that kitchen is functional for cooking, but the building continues to house people even without that. So I guess my bigger concern is the safety of people who are currently living in the building under the current conditions. So for the work that needs to be done, like we saw a lot of wiring problems in the I don't know, in the walls, in the basements, in parts of the structure. We saw a lot of wiring problems.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about the speed at which some of those could be remedied. Anything you can share?
Those could be remedied very quickly, and could be remedied on a case-by-case basis as the building is occupied. We could take circuits offline, correct the wiring, and put the circuit back online, but it would not require that we empty the building for those improvements to be made. I did identify during my tour that there are some plug strips and wiring that I would like to have replaced, and we are identifying those on our drawings. I'm also talking with our engineer as we speak to make sure that, as it's been pointed out, what type of wiring. The wiring is good. In many cases, it's been supported, it's concealed or run exposed. It's just a matter of making sure that it was done correctly. And it's my understanding that some of that work was done without a permit. Doesn't mean it wasn't done right. It was just done without a permit. And that's what we're working through right now, Ms. Hunter. But there are, considering the age of the building, there are a few instances where we need to replace a handful of receptacles, do some wiring organization. And that's one of the notes on my drawing already, is to organize some of the wiring and get rid of some of the balls of wiring that are in there that need to be corrected and put in more neatly and appropriately for proper maintenance and security.
Good, thank you. Yes, that helps. I live in a house that's about the same age as that building, so I know that stuff has to be dealt with, right?
Question for Mr. McClellan. I think this is going to be for Mr. McClellan. Are sprinklers required in this building? And is that a fire question or a building question?
It actually falls in both categories, but they should not be required because of the long-standing occupancy of this structure. It has been a residential structure for quite some time. Existing building code allows those things to exist. I would not expect there to be a sprinkler requirement for the structure. Of course, there will be suppression requirements. So when you say sprinkler, that's kind of a broad term. There will be suppression requirements, of course, in the kitchen, which are sprinkler-like. However, sprinklering throughout the building, I wouldn't imagine would be required.
Okay, okay, thank you. And is there any other discussion among the board with this? And Mr. Muse, because Mr. Gutschall was brought into the conversation, if you would like to cross-examine him at this point, because he was brought into the conversation by a board member, we can go forward with that.
I would just like to ask if you have a reasonable expectation, or I realize that you've partially answered it in your jurisdiction as far as design and all, but do you have a reasonable reasonable estimation of time it will take to bring the building to the necessary standards?
That is contingent on some factors that I have no control over, such as lead time on the equipment, but I would expect we could do it within the next 90 days.
All right, now I understand the equipment part. I was just asking your estimation reasonably of a completion time.
Now, about 90 days, knowing what I know right now.
Mr. Muse, I think you were about to speak earlier and Mr. Jenny spoke. So if you would like to cross-examine Mr. Gutschall based on what he has stated, we can go forward.
Thank you, Chairwoman Lockmiller, and I will do so with a few questions and then defer to my co-counsel for any remaining questions from our side. But Mr. Gutschall, when you were speaking about some of the electrical wiring and things, you conveyed that those matters could be done while the occupants were in the building, that you may need to cut off a circuit breaker or something momentarily, but that could be done in the building. Is that correct?
That's what I said. It's correct.
Okay, and given your knowledge and professional expertise, is that something generally that you can say at this time that what you've encountered would allow for corrections to be made without having to remove the occupants, at least for any extended period of time from the building?
That is correct. And as we know, and Dave knows, that we would follow NFPA 241 for construction safeguards. And if there were an instance where something had to be taken offline, the occupancy, for instance, occupants could be moved to the dining room while the system is offline, and they could do a fire watch while the repairs are being made. An example would be we'll have to be down for a few minutes or an hour to make the tie into the fire alarm system, bring it up back online. For the kitchen hoods, the new kitchen hoods, we'd have to bring those back online, test them. During that time, the occupants could be outside, or they could sit in the dining hall where they'd be safe, which is in a separate building from the other areas. So that's an example of some of the things we can do, but there is a procedure in NFPA 241 to follow that process.
Okay, thank you. And I'll defer any further questions to my co-counsel, Ms. Amber Lee.
I have no questions.
Is there any other discussion with the board? The motion that we have, Ms. Lawrence, could you read the motion back to us, please?
Yes, ma'am. It was a motion made to limit capacity to the current occupancy level while repairs are being made.
Okay, is there any other discussion among the board?
Well,
I believe I further amended that motion to say,
Oh.
limit the occupancy to 35.
Okay.
Okay,
so if we could, just in terms of procedural clarifications, going back to my question before about making findings. What I've done is I've been obviously taking notes here, and I want to try to help you all based on what I've heard. And I want to be careful not to put words in your mouths, but I want to help you with this finding process. So I could make a statement and you could tell me whether or not you agree with it. Hang on one second.
So what you're asking is in our motion to include more information.
Right. And so before you make the motion, those are the findings.
Okay.
And so, but I'm going to help you with that. And so it sounds like that you've got kind of two big chunks of information that you're operating off of here. You're operating off of obviously the information that Mr. Gutschall's provided in terms of kind of where they are in the evaluation and what could be done and maintain a certain level of safety. And then the other chunk of information is, or kind of the question that you have in front of you is, are you considering, or because you mentioned it during the motion, what could potentially be the a maximum capacity while all this is happening? And so I'll just start. Would you agree that that the architect Carl Gutschall appeared before the board this evening and testified to the status of his as-built development and the system and his evaluation of the current building systems?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that that Mr. Gutschall testified that construction could potentially begin within roughly 90 days based on his current evaluation and preliminary plan development?
Yes.
I
Within-
thought completion was within 90 days.
I thought he said
Within-
completion as well.
Yes.
Well,
So this is why we do this, because y'all all need to be on the same page as to what you heard. This
I
is-
think it's somewhat. with
within
construct-
90 days.
This is why
90 days.
findings are important. So Mr. Gutschall, could you clarify the 90-day comment?
I think the progression was, if you want to keep track of this, was 1 week for us to finish our documents and
Mhm.
submit them to the city.
Yes.
About a week to 2 weeks for David and me to get into agreement on the review of the plans on what we're going to have. And then that adds up to about 3 weeks. We would have a set of documents that the contractor could use to apply for a permit for the various repairs and maintenance that needs to be done on the building. And then 90 days is my estimate after that. So it'd be 90 days plus 3 weeks. Does that everybody understand?
Yes. And
Okay.
I understand that that is your estimate. and
Correct.
there are factors that we don't have any control over.
Correct.
About that, how soon contractors are available, how soon equipment is available, things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
So if I could, so
Motion.
bear with me, Commissioner Hunter, forgive me, hang on one second here. I need to ask Mr. McClellan a question because I want to make sure that what was testified to by Mr. Gutschall is there's not a conflict. Dave, at the March 11th meeting, you had indicated that it was either the March 11th meeting or February 25th, that that our initial plan review is 5 days. is that initial plan review, or is that plan review in total is 5 days? Can you please clarify?
Absolutely initial. As mentioned earlier tonight, if the plans are perfect, it happens in 5 days. Carl mentioned a week or two to work it out. I would imagine that in his mind, that I don't mean to speak for him, but that includes coming back to us, and then we have an additional 3 business day turnaround for any revision post the initial 5 business day turnaround. And that is extremely expedient for any turnaround for such an activity in the region. So sometimes it can take a month to get your plans reviewed alone, to be frank. Sometimes, if maybe not, maybe it's a week and a half. So there is there are a few week variable there. Absolutely. That's unknown. That's just for a plans review. Then you do the equipment, then you do the contractors. So it's hard to nail down when this thing could be done because of so many unknowns.
Okay, I think I need to ask another procedural question, Mr. Mitchell. We tend to go about these things in motions in several steps. So in my mind, I'm seeing a limitation of occupancy as one step. Another step may be the board deciding on a length of time to require necessary repairs. Would that be a logical progression should we go that way?
So I appreciate you asking that question, because now I believe I have a better understanding of of maybe where you were coming from in your thinking. Allow me to answer it this way, and hopefully I'm going to answer your question. If I don't answer your question, say it again and I'll try. No, I would not suggest that you make multiple motions. What needs to occur is to go through this series of findings. You're basically stating, and as a group, stating facts, how you see them. We find or we see that these things are true because of
Okay.
who provided that information, or the information that was provided to us in document form. That's your findings. And then after that, because you have the ability to make orders tonight, you would then, after you make your findings, order the property owner to X. And that order can have a couple of different steps to it, but you would really want to make your findings first and then make one order, as opposed to making multiple motions.
Okay.
So based on the information that I just heard from Dave McClellan, and then the clarification from Mr. Gutschau, would the board do you believe that, or would you find that that the project could potentially get underway within 120 days or so from this evening, barring some other problem through the plan review process and through the architect's lead time, as he stated?
I would like to state that after 31 years with the city as a mechanical inspector and chief building official, that I think what we've heard tonight is reasonable. I think what Mr. Gutschau has said and Dave McClellan has said, it is very reasonable. I would not agree to what you said of work to be initiated within 120 days.
No.
I would like to see the work completed within 120 days. If not, brought back before the board to show us at what state we're at and what completion time at that time would be.
Sure. No, I think the way you just worded that was excellent. What you could do is you could make a finding that based on the testimony or that was received from the architect and from the development services manager, you find that the provided time frame is reasonable. And you can leave it at that. Do you as a board find that the time frame provided to you as of tonight, there's still many unknowns, but that the time frame provided to you tonight, based on the information you've received from Mr. Gutshaw, is a reasonable time frame?
I don't know that we can make that assumption until we have all the information. And I don't think Mr. Gutshaw he's acknowledged that 75% complete. So my concern is making a decision based on 75% of the information.
Okay. So maybe we need to
So-
move on from that particular finding, and let me move on to a couple of others and see if you agree. Because I've gotten a check mark on that. The architect has appeared before the board and testified to the status of the as-built and his evaluation. That the architect appeared before the board and testified that the electrical circuits some electrical circuits could come offline, or other systems temporarily offline without impacting occupancy.
Well,
That's what he said.
if he's 75% complete, have all the electrical circuits been checked? I guess that's my concern is, are we at 75% of the electricity's been checked, or are we at 100% has been checked? And we know that's what we're dealing with going forward.
Right. And so we don't know that tonight. And so you would just need to make a decision as a body on whether or not you believe that his statement that certain circuits and other systems could temporarily come offline, and that without impacting occupancy, you need to decide whether or not you're satisfied with that statement.
I guess
I feel that that's where we stand at the moment. We're not saying, or I'm not saying that it will be completed in that amount of time. I'm saying that is an estimate given to us, and that it is a reasonable estimate. And therefore, I think we should go along with that, but not finaling this out. Just saying, if it is not completed and shown to us that it is completed and certificates of occupancy and such are issued within that time frame, then it needs to come back before us for further action or further motion to complete the job. But at the same time, I agree with Gwen that in this period of time, we need to limit the occupancy to what they say it is now of no more than 35.
Okay, so go ahead, Jen, Ms. Lockmiller, go ahead.
well, and I'm just questioning, do we want to, sorry, Gwen,
No, go ahead.
vote down your motion and come up with a new motion that is basically to continue the property to the next meeting when we have the information, and also limit occupancy in the interim while we wait to have the information? I'm uncomfortable making a decision without having all the information.
I agree with you there.
Right. Ultimately, I think my goal is that we be assured that, well, let me go back. Occupancy is currently at 35. It is my understanding that is it correct that it will remain at that number if we take no further action? Or was that just the owner self-limited?
Right. I think that was just self-limiting.
Okay, so I think it's important based on the information that we have been presented, I'm convinced, based on the testimony of the architect, there appear to be steps that have been taken to make it less dangerous than it was, than when we made another decision.
Mhm.
Based on those findings, I would like us to be able to limit the occupancy of that building to approximately half, which is 35, if what Mr. Kutcha estimated. There's several different ways I understand you can estimate occupancy. Based on 35, based on those findings and the fire things, just so that we're limiting risk to everyone in the building, and we're limiting risk to emergency responders that would be called upon to help in the case of an emergency. And I want that limitation to remain in effect until this building is completely safe for full occupancy, and they have all the necessary permits and the certificate of occupancy, or whatever the proper procedures are to assure us of that. So tonight, I'm hoping we can come up with a way to limit the occupancy just for the safety of those people while the building is being brought up to proper safety, because it's important to me that people have a safe place to live.
So,
And we'll also need to put something in there where we all hold ourselves accountable to some sort of reasonable time frame to get that done. And I'm not quite sure how to get to where I want to be.
well, you are doing it. You are getting there. The statement you just made was a good finding. That was, and so in addition to your statement, y'all have already agreed to the initial ask that I posed. And sounds like there's not agreement at this point, though, on time frame or on electrical circuits. But you did make a finding based on the architect's testimony regarding maximum occupancy using a variety of different reasons, that being showers or toilets or square footage. He had testified that I believe using showers, it was roughly 60 or so. And then you just found that half of that is a reasonable number in order to maintain or to lower the risk and maintain a certain level of safety. So the way you worded that was great. Would the board also agree that the development services manager, Dave McClellan, appeared before the board and testified to to his administrative closure of the kitchen last fall, and that was specifically, it was done so in a way to shut down all kitchen operations because of heating and ventilation, and that he has now testified that as long as there continues to be no heating or ventilation or operation that would impact heating or ventilation, that some operation of the kitchen could occur. I want to be careful not to put words in.
Would it be better to say occupancy of the kitchen rather than operation? Because the idea is that food is not necessarily being prepared, food is not necessarily being heated. It's just simply serving of cold food.
Sure.
Would that be a better description?
I would need for Dave to confirm that.
It's
Or a
really-
worse description?
It's really gray. There's no good definition of that. I think everybody here understands what we're talking about. No cooking, no microwave, no stove, no fryers, no, sandwich, cold bread, That sounds okay. Bowl
No
cereal.
toasters.
Yeah.
No griddles, no nothing.
I mean, I think that no electricity or gas required to prepare the food, I think would be a fair, those are
Okay.
things we have issues with, so I think that's fair.
Okay.
So,
So it sounds like that if you all are in agreement with those statements, then you've done a good job of making findings based on kind of where it sounds like you want to go. Now, from there, I would decide whether or not you want to maintain the existing motion or if you want to modify the motion in some way, but those findings, the way you've written that, you could, or the way that you've stated that, you could order now to do X, Y, or Z. If you order to do X, Y, or Z, typically after you make an order, that will close further consideration of the case until staff reports back and puts it on another agenda. If you want to maintain if you want to keep this active, you could make that any order and then simply continue the meeting.
I personally feel that the orders that we've discussed and are before us are good. I just think that we need to put a specific time limit before us that it is either brought back to us as completed and acceptable by the city, or it comes back before us to make further motions or actions. I think we need a time limit here.
okay, based on the, I'm ready to amend my motion. Based on the testimony that we have heard in previous meetings and the testimony we heard this evening, I make a motion that the occupancy of the property of 123 West Millard Street be limited to 35 in order to reduce safe and to improve reduced safety risks. Keep that number limited to 35 until all work is completed and the building is up to code. I would like to, and then I would like to further add to that motion to continue this property to the April 22 meeting of the Board of Dwelling Standards and Review, when we can hear an update on the progress of the from the architect and city staff.
I will agree to that.
Ms. Lawrence, did you get that amended motion or motion?
I did, and would Ms. Robbins like to continue her second on that, or would she like to defer to Mr. Jenny as a second?
Mr. Jenny.
Okay,
I would be glad to second that emotion.
okay. Would you like it read back?
Yes, please.
Okay. The motion has been amended to occupancy be limited to 35 to reduce safety risk until all work is completed and up to code. Also, to continue to the April BDSR meeting to hear update on progress from the architect.
Is there any board discussion for that motion? Ms. Lawrence, would you like to call for the question, please?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hyder,
Recuse.
Mr. Jenny,
Yes,
Ms. Robbins,
Yes.
Ms. Hunter,
Yes.
Ms. Lockmiller.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Okay, is there any other discussion about the property at 123 West Millard? Any other motions anyone would like to make? Okay, thank you all so much. This is a really difficult situation. I think our utmost concern for all of us on the board is to provide a safe place for can't get the Bible verse in my head, but whatever you do to the least among us. And so this is definitely a group of people who are working towards a better life. And the last thing we want to do is make their life more difficult. So I think I'm really happy with the way that the motions occurred right now. So we will hear back next month about the property. If there are no further businesses to come before the Board of Dwelling Standards and Review, is
I
there
would,
any?
I would
Oh.
just like to be on the record as saying, thank you to the owner and the architect and everyone who is working to make improvements. Thank you for doing that. And we just look forward to the continuing improvements of this property.
Yes, we all appreciate the extra work that's happening. So if there's no further comments, that was the only item on our agenda. So we will adjourn at 7:06. Thank you all very much.